Alexander Carter, a name synonymous with power and wealth, was a man sculpted from ambition and loss. At 45, he commanded a towering empire, his skyscrapers piercing the city skyline like monuments to his relentless drive. He was a force to be reckoned with, a man whose word was law in boardrooms and whose decisions shaped markets. But beneath the polished veneer of success lay a chilling emptiness. His heart, once capable of love and warmth, had hardened into a fortress, protecting him from the pain of a past he desperately tried to bury. One bleak November afternoon, as a biting wind whipped through the city streets, Alexander found himself stopped at a red light in his sleek black Bentley. He was returning from a particularly brutal negotiation, a victory that left him feeling strangely hollow. He prided himself on his ruthlessness, his ability to dissect deals and exploit weaknesses. It was a skill that had served him well, but today, the taste of victory felt strangely bitter. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a small figure huddled by the curb. A boy, no older than 7, his clothes patched and worn, his face smudged with dirt. A plaintive voice, barely a whisper above the city's roar, reached him. "Please, sir, buy my drawing. I'm very hungry." Alexander, usually immune to such appeals, felt a flicker of irritation. He was accustomed to being approached by beggars, by those seeking a handout. He had built his empire on self-reliance and hard work, and he had little patience for those who couldn't, or wouldn't, do the same. But something in the boy's voice, a vulnerability that cut through his carefully constructed armor, made him hesitate. He reluctantly lowered his window. "Show me," he said, his voice gruff, the tone of a man used to giving orders. The boy approached cautiously, his eyes wide and hesitant. He held out a crumpled piece of paper. As Alexander took it, he expected a childish scribble, a clumsy attempt to earn a few coins. What he saw instead made his breath catch in his throat. It was a drawing, crude but undeniably detailed, of a grand mansion. A mansion that was eerily familiar. Alexander's hands trembled slightly as he studied the lines. It wasn't just any mansion, it was his mansion. Carter Hall, his sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, meticulously rendered with a child's unsteady hand. The manicured gardens, the towering windows, the ornate fountain in the courtyard, it was all there, captured with a precision that defied explanation. How could this boy, a street urchin, know so much about his private sanctuary? But it was the two figures standing in front of the mansion that sent a jolt of icy fear through Alexander's veins. A tall man in a dark suit, and beside him, a small boy clutching his hand. The man, it was unmistakably him. A younger, less hardened version of himself, but undeniably Alexander Carter. His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence of his expensive car. Who was this boy? How could he know this? His logical mind screamed for a rational explanation, a trick, a coincidence. But a deeper, more primal instinct told him that something far more unsettling was at play. He stared at the boy, who was watching him with expectant eyes. "Where?" Alexander managed to ask, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Where did you learn to draw this?" The boy looked down, scuffing his worn shoes against the pavement. I don't know, sir. It's just something I see in my head sometimes," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "My mom always said I had a good imagination." "Your mother?" Alexander pressed, the question catching in his throat. The boy nodded, his expression clouding with sadness. "She passed away last year. I don't have anyone now, sir. I just wanted to sell my drawing so I could buy something to eat." A wave of something akin to pity washed over Alexander. Pity wasn't an emotion he often allowed himself to feel. He considered driving away, dismissing the boy as another unfortunate soul in a city full of them. He should offer a few dollars and be on his way. It was the sensible, rational thing to do. But he couldn't. He was drawn to the boy, compelled by a force he couldn't understand. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here," he said, extending the bill to the boy. "This is enough for food." The boy's eyes widened, but he shook his head. "I can't take that for free, sir. You have to keep the drawing." Alexander stared at the boy, his gaze intense, searching. He saw not just hunger and poverty, but something else, a strange knowingness, a quiet strength. He took the drawing and placed it on the leather seat beside him. "All right," he said, handing over the bill. The boy's face broke into a tentative smile. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Before Alexander could say anything else, the light turned green, and the impatient honking of cars behind him shattered the moment. He pressed the accelerator, the Bentley surging forward. He glanced in his rearview mirror and watched the boy fade into the anonymity of the city. But as he sped away, the drawing remained etched in his mind, a haunting image that refused to fade. It was too strange, too unsettling to simply dismiss. That night, Alexander sat alone in his opulent living room, the drawing lying on the mahogany table before him. The room, usually a symbol of his success, felt strangely cold and empty. He tried to distract himself with work, poring over financial reports and market analyses, but his concentration was shattered. The boy's sketch consumed his thoughts, a persistent whisper in the back of his mind. He stared at the drawing, searching for an explanation, a logical reason for its power over him. The more he looked, the more the details seemed to come alive, evoking long-buried memories. The mansion, the man, the boy. His own childhood had been a stark contrast to the life he now led. Raised in poverty, he had known hunger and hardship. His mother had died when he was young, and his father, broken by grief, had succumbed to alcoholism. Alexander had clawed his way out of that life, driven by a fierce determination to escape the poverty and despair that had consumed his family. He had built his empire brick by brick, sacrificing everything for success. But now, looking at the drawing, he couldn't escape the feeling that it was pulling him back to a time he had tried so hard to forget. It was a reminder of the vulnerability he had buried, the emotions he had suppressed. Over the next few days, Alexander found himself increasingly distracted. His business suffered, his carefully maintained control slipping. His colleagues noticed the change in him, the restless energy, the uncharacteristic irritability. He canceled meetings, made impulsive decisions, and seemed to be lost in his own thoughts. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of a man on the verge of a breakdown. Then, one afternoon, as he was leaving his office, he saw him. The same boy, standing at the same corner where they had met before. It was as if fate had orchestrated their encounter. This time, Alexander didn't hesitate. He pulled over, the Bentley screeching to a halt, and approached the boy, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "You?" Alexander said, kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes. "I need to talk to you." The boy looked up, surprised but not afraid. "Is everything all right, sir?" Alexander took a deep breath, struggling to control the emotions churning inside him. "That drawing you gave me. How did you know? How did you know about the mansion, the man me?" The boy looked confused. "I didn't know, sir. I told you. It's just something I see in my head. I don't know why." Alexander's mind raced. There had to be more to this. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, his gaze shifting to the ground. "Ethan," he said quietly. "Ethan," Alexander repeated, his voice softening. "Ethan, do you have anywhere to go? Any family?" Ethan shook his head, his eyes filled with a heartbreaking resignation. "No, sir. I've been on my own for a while." Without thinking, Alexander made a decision that shocked even himself. He reached out and took the boy's hand. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "Where, sir?" "To my house," Alexander replied, his voice filled with a newfound purpose. I think we're connected somehow. And I need to know why." The drive back to Carter Hall was silent, filled with unspoken questions and a growing sense of unease. As they approached the mansion, Ethan stared in awe, his eyes wide with wonder. Alexander watched him, searching for answers in his young face. When Alexander brought Ethan into the mansion, his staff was stunned. Mrs. Hawthorne, his longtime housekeeper, nearly dropped the silver tea service she was carrying. Never in all their years of service had they seen Alexander Carter show such kindness to anyone, let alone a street child. They exchanged nervous glances, wondering what this sudden act of charity could mean. But Alexander was oblivious to their reactions. He felt something deeper at play, something beyond mere charity. He had to understand this boy, his strange ability, his uncanny connection to his past. Days passed, and as Ethan settled into Alexander's home, more peculiarities began to emerge. The boy was drawn to certain rooms in the mansion, ones that even Alexander rarely entered. He would often stare at the walls or old furniture, as if they held hidden meanings. He seemed to know the layout of the house instinctively, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with ease. One evening, as Alexander was reading in the library, Ethan approached him hesitantly. "Sir," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "do you know about the boy who lived here before?" Alexander froze, his blood turning to ice. There hadn't been a boy living in the mansion in years, not since. But how could Ethan know? "What boy?" Alexander asked, his voice tight with apprehension. "The one who used to play in the gardens," Ethan said, his eyes distant, as if recalling a memory. "He was happy here, until he wasn't." Alexander's mind reeled. There had been a boy, his own son, Thomas, from a long-forgotten past. A past he had deliberately erased. But that was impossible. Thomas had died in a tragic accident when he was just a child. No one knew about him, not even his closest associates. Alexander had kept that part of his life locked away, buried beneath layers of ambition and grief. The pain had been too great to bear. But Ethan's words brought it all rushing back. The joy of Thomas's birth, the laughter in the gardens, the agonizing grief of his loss. He had tried to forget, focusing on building his empire to numb the pain. But now it seemed that the past had found its way back to him through a child who shouldn't have known. Alexander could no longer deny the truth. Ethan's uncanny knowledge of the mansion, his connection to the boy in the drawing, his ability to evoke memories that Alexander had desperately tried to suppress, it was all too much to ignore. He took Ethan's hand and led him to the old nursery, a room that had remained untouched since Thomas's death. As they entered, Ethan's eyes widened, and a soft smile spread across his face. This was his room, he whispered, as if speaking to someone invisible. He used to sit here by the window, waiting for you to come home. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. He had often been absent during Thomas's short life, consumed by his work and the pursuit of wealth. He had always told himself that there would be more time, that he would make it up to Thomas later. But fate had been cruel, snatching his son away before he had a chance to be a proper father. Tears filled Alexander's eyes as he knelt beside Ethan, his heart breaking with a grief he thought he had conquered. "How do you know all of this?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. Ethan looked at him with those same haunting eyes, the eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface, into the depths of his soul. "I don't know, sir," he said softly. "I just feel it." And in that moment, Alexander understood. Ethan wasn't just any child. He was a messenger, a reminder of the son he had lost and the love he had forsaken in his relentless pursuit of wealth. The boy in the drawing wasn't just a random figure. It was Thomas, reaching out to him from beyond the grave, through Ethan. In the weeks that followed, Alexander's life changed in ways he never thought possible. He officially adopted Ethan, giving the boy the home and family he had always longed for. He enrolled him in the best schools, showered him with love and attention, and finally learned what it meant to be a father. But more than that, Alexander found something he had lost long ago: his heart. The mansion, once a cold symbol of his wealth and power, became a home filled with laughter and warmth. Ethan's presence healed the wounds that Alexander had carried for so long, reminding him of the importance of love, family, and connection. He began to spend less time at the office, delegating responsibilities to his trusted colleagues. He realized that true wealth wasn't found in money or power, but in the relationships he forged and the love he shared. And in the end, it wasn't the boy's drawing that had changed Alexander's life. It was the love he had rediscovered in a child who had brought him back to life. The past, though painful, had found a way to make peace with the present, and Alexander Carter, once a cold-hearted billionaire, learned that the greatest treasures are not found in the pursuit of wealth, but in the simple joys of family and the enduring power of love.